Coffee. I was a little late because I was putting sunscreen on one of my legs. One of my legs is in the sun. Maybe that'll change, or more of me will end up in the sun as we continue our conversation this morning. Welcome, everybody. I'm glad that we can get together and have these conversations. There, maybe if you're in mental health communities online, there's a lot of conversation this week in all sorts of different ways. And it's useful to see there are so many ways that we can work on mental health and take care of mental health. And we'll often have so many different goals. And it's useful to be able to find the resources that are going to help you work on your mental health in the way that you want to pursue the goals that you want to. Like, I really enjoy no longer struggling with intrusive thoughts, no longer experiencing those intrusive thoughts or struggling with the things I struggled with in the past. I mean, and it's been great. It also required a lot of changes. Those changes helped me do the things that I want to do in life. But other people may have different things they want to do in life, and different approaches will help them take care of themselves and do those things that they want to do. And it's not about like there's any particular right way or wrong way to go about that. Just like if I want to go and get donuts, I'm going to do things that are useful to me to go and get donuts. But somebody else may, I don't know, want to go and buy vegetables, and that's okay. Hello, everybody. Just Jazz, Pom Pom Kitty, good morning. Oh, Just Jazz, thank you for the donut. I didn't see that before I mentioned donuts, but I appreciate that. There is not a place for me to get donuts very close by, but there are good donuts if I travel a bit. And good donuts are worth traveling for. Nikita, hello. LS, you're listening from Northern Ireland. Good to see you. Kimberly, hey. Robert, thank you. We do have a cool background. Got some mountains over there. So, I think there's a tree over there. Sound spaces. You're having thunderstorms right now. And you took a walk in the warm rain and lightning. This is nice to walk out in the rain. I'm glad you didn't get hit by the lightning. Kimberly, hey. Can't remember if I said hey already, but hey. And Narina, the weather looks really good. You said, indeed. Yeah, the weather is really good here. The weather, it's interesting. The weather, it's so fascinating because, yeah, sometimes we're used to maybe places where like the weather is a particular way during the day. And so we say that's the weather's good today, or, it's sunny today, it's rainy today. But one thing I like about where I am right now is that the weather changes throughout the day. So, mornings are typically the same weather, afternoons are typically the same weather, and so within the day, the weather changes. And it's something I enjoy about where I'm staying right now. I've stayed in places like this before, and I really like it as a way to approach living arrangements, because so often we live in places, especially in North America, where we've become accustomed to the house having a very controlled climate, and we'll spend a lot of energy and money on controlling the climate, and so it's kind of separated from how the climate is and the weather outside. But where I'm staying right now, one of the things I like is that there's kind of a process to go through each morning to help the place warm up. So opening up my home to the sunshine, because it'll get cold at night, and then we open it up during the day and it warms up. And having a house that kind of breathes with the environment around it, I really like that. I like that process of caring for it and opening it up and closing it down. Elsko, you're having rain and thunder too. I was say thank you. Jillian, hello. Rika, hello, hello. Neon purple. I'm glad the quality is good. Sarath, you said, I'm that person who texted you on Instagram yesterday about weight loss. Can you elaborate more on the cortisol ERP connection? Uh, I, I would ask why you want to spend more time on that. What if you don't have, because it's very common that we get caught up in this, right? Because an invisible thing like cortisol, it just becomes a new contamination. Oh, like what if I'm going to have cortisol? But also, I wouldn't understand what you mean by a cortisol ERP connection. ERP would be about not, getting caught up in worrying about that, but instead, doing, physical fitness things you want to do, doing mental health things you want to do. Liz, hello. Anthony said, I have something personal to ask. Is it okay to talk about personal stuff on here? I don't know what you mean by personal, because I would think everything we talk about on here is personal stuff. We don't usually talk about other people. We usually talk about ourselves. One of the things, though, I suggest it's so helpful, and this is for everybody. When we're exploring mental health, it's so useful to make the work about where we're going. It can feel when it's difficult that we want to focus in on the problem and be like, this is bad, I've got to fix it. But then we're just putting that thing we hate at the center of our lives. And we're letting that thing we hate take control of our lives and run it. We're giving it our time and energy. And we make it necessary. Because if success depends on defeating enemies, then we need to keep finding enemies. So if success depends on fixing a feeling inside of us that we hate, we're going to need a lot more feelings inside of us that we hate. So it helps so much to make it about where we want to go. So yeah, Anthony, if you're thinking about something personal, I mean, everything we talk about here is very personal, but actually taking a step and saying, oh, maybe I don't have to talk about a problem, but actually let's explore where you want to go. So what is the thing you want to be doing? And then we can talk about ways to do that. Because that really is a useful way out of struggling with mental health. We identify where we go and the things that are going to take us there. Jillian, welcome. Thank you. Alize said, in your book, you mentioned about how the brain doesn't know whether the stove is on or off. It's just a thought, right? Who knows then about the stove being on or off? I don't know what your question is then. Why would it matter? It's a great, a great physics question, but like we know, we can't tell the state of a particle unless we measure it. But then measuring it affects it. Exactly. And I match the blue mug with the sky. Jillian, he said, could I ask a question? How do you get over obsession and thought with no compulsions, fear of a thought, how not to be scared of it? Yeah, so one thing that I find really helpful is to see that, compulsions in our head are also compulsions. So for example, if there's a thought that pops up, like anything, so I have my sunscreen here. So let's say I have a thought in my head about sunscreen. If I then go, oh, whoa, that shouldn't be there. Or I go, oh, I need to spend time and energy on that, figuring it out. Like the question that just came up, if I'm like, is there sunscreen inside the sunscreen bottle or not? Oh no, I've got to think about it. And then I start like thinking about, well, how much sunscreen did I use earlier? And oh, will I have enough later if I want to go to the beach? Am I going to have enough sunscreen? I mean, it's a small bottle, and what if I don't? And then I get sunburned, and that would be terrible. And all of that is compulsions, 100% compulsions, because it's no different than me doing the exact same with the sunscreen bottle. Do I have enough? Is it big enough? I don't know. Let's look inside of it, and so on. Whether I do that inside of my head or I'm doing it outside of my head, both are compulsions. And so it's useful to look at changing how we do that. So how I spend my time and energy, whether I'm spending my time and energy with my hands, my feet, or my mind, is all about how I spend time and energy, and that's where we make the changes. And so you mentioned there too, like being scared of it. When we judge a thought and go, that's bad, that is full of compulsions. It really helped me to recognize that. Like intrusive thoughts are compulsions. I've got to judge a thought as, that's bad, that's dangerous. Those are things that we can change. And so one thing, I ask you like to explore this, is to consider that thoughts don't do anything to us. We do things to thoughts. When these thoughts come up, what do you do to them? How do you try to control them? What labels do you stick on them? And that's the stuff to explore and the opportunities to change. So what if the uncertainty is about things we value? Example, taking money out, getting it exchanged into another currency. So it wouldn't, there wouldn't, again, I'd look, like, why would that be different? And again, like thinking about those judgments that you're attaching to it. Like an uncertainty is an uncertainty. We can interact with it in a way that's healthy to us. That's about doing the things we want to do well. It doesn't matter if it's a uncertainty we value or not. Yeah, and I see you repeat. I don't understand what your follow-up to the stove question means down below. Robert. See, going through anxiety leading to depression because I feel like I need to see a psychologist to feel grounded and express myself, but I don't really want to see one and I can't make up my mind. The idea of grounded is one that I find useful to see can easily get us wrapped up in compulsions. It's very similar to I'm holding my hands like this because I want to say, if we want to feel clean, it's the same thing. If somebody said, I need to go and do this because I need to feel clean and I can't, do something else unless I feel clean or unless I feel the environment is clean. Easy way to get us wrapped up in contamination compulsions. And the same with all sorts of other feelings. For like, I need to feel grounded. I need to get this feeling. And you can see how the brain turns that into something to get right. Then if I can only get that feeling with this person, but then there's these other reasons I don't think I should go to see that person, I can't make up my mind, it's just an easy way to get us ruminating. So I would ask, like I was talking about earlier, you might have asked that question before, where do I want to go? What are the things that are going to take me there? And then looking at the actions that are going to go there with any feeling. And it might be a feeling of not being grounded. It might be also about finding there are other ways to express yourself. And that expression doesn't have to come with those prerequisites or with a particular feeling. Narina, you said, how do you deal with memories of people getting upset with your compulsions or people not understanding your OCD? Something that helped me a lot. And I know in lots of videos I use the term like how to deal with something. But seeing that we have painful experiences, and yeah, they can be painful. And really in that moment, it's about giving compassion and understanding to ourselves. Being able to say, I didn't feel understood there. Yeah, why does that hurt? And being able to give kind of like that younger self is there and we can give them a hug. Even being like, because so often, right, there's we don't like doing the compulsion, but then also somebody else is upset about that, and then that feeds into the compulsions because maybe we're doing compulsions because we're afraid of being judged by others. And so it just becomes this fuel for the cycle. And so giving compassion to ourselves, being able to say, yeah, that hurts because I want to be understood and I wasn't understood. But then bringing it to right now, being able to recognize, oh yeah, I want to be able to express the things I want. I want to be able to do the things I want to do. And what's that look like today? Because it's so often like we're taking around, we're babysitting our younger self. So we're in the car, we got to drive around our younger self today, and they're really upset about something that happened in the past. We could say, okay, I get it. You're upset about this. Let's stop the car. Let's not go anywhere. Let's just stay home and feel bad about it. We can also, with compassion, say, okay, I know this feels really bad and that hurt. Here's why it hurt. So let's go and do things that are opportunities to, whether it's express ourselves, share what we want, do more of the things we want to do, bring that freedom and that agency into our lives. And seeing that, yeah, it's probably going to be more useful to take that hurt kid somewhere fun. And yeah, show them that they can live their life and do the things they want to do. Victor, probably one of the things to look at will be like the compulsions to check for reassurance about stuff like that. It really helped me to see that my brain was happy to give me lots of uncomfortable physical sensations if I was going to go and do more compulsions around them. Stephen, I hope all is well with you. Ches said, how do you operate in the gray area with health anxiety? Sometimes a symptom could be something more serious. It could. Absolutely. So I struggled with lots of health anxiety compulsions. In the past, I would go get all sorts of tests, like spend hours, Googling. This is how I Google. I just flail my hands on the computer and Google figures it out. It helps so much to shift the focus to what I want to build with my health. And then having a clear plan for, when it comes to physical fitness, when it comes to health as well, here are the actions I'm going to do to take care of my health. And absolutely, the brain is going to throw up uncertainties about all sorts of things. And they could be serious and dangerous, and it could be the end of my life and so on. So I identify proactively how I'm going to take care of my health, what I'm going to use as basically having my own healthcare algorithm. So what I'm going to use as a trigger point to say, okay, if this thing happens, then I will go and ask somebody. But yeah, it's going to be full of uncertainty and fear. And so I've got to trust in the things I'm doing to proactively take care of my health. And then with other things, I'm going to practice taking care of my mental health. So I saw that I was doing a lot of damage to my health by choosing to practice all those compulsions out of the fear of the possibility of something bad happening. And so that didn't make sense, right? It's like saying, oh, my arm could get stung by a bee later, so I will chop off my arm to prevent myself from getting stung by a bee. And that's not a very effective approach to health. Marlos, welcome. Marlos, he said, do you think that quotes like everything happens for a reason is a way humans try to feel in control because we don't like things happening just because, like death? Yeah, absolutely. In so many ways, we've built all of these sayings and systems to, you could really look at a lot of traditions. This is trying to give us a feeling of control, trying to give us a feeling of certainty and that we are at least doing something in the face of a very random and turbulent universe. Oh, DK, thank you. Pom Pom Kitty said, how do we cope with a heartbreak? Also, how do we start trusting people again? There's always the fear of getting your heart broken again. Yeah, and that, I don't know if you caught earlier, I was talking about that hurt younger self who, maybe felt misunderstood, but it's really the same, right? We experience things that are painful. And then it's like that younger self, even if it's just a younger self from a couple weeks ago, gets seared into the brain. And they're like, I will protect you from this ever happening again. But they are like a really super overzealous head of security that is then like, you can't do this, you can't do this, you'll get hurt. What if you get hurt here? How are we going to heal this? Oh, what's going to happen? And so on. Really trying to protect ourselves. We don't like feeling uncomfortable. We don't like vulnerability. In many ways, you could look at a lot of the fears and uncertainties we struggle with as just being about trying to avoid pain, trying to avoid vulnerability. So one, it's totally understandable, right? Of course we want to avoid pain and vulnerability. I mean, we want to avoid bad coffee and bad donuts. Of course, like these are terrible things we don't want to have happen. This is good coffee, so don't worry anybody. But it's useful to show ourselves that we can experience pain, right? And maybe we don't have to deal with heartbreak. We don't have to make it go away. We're having a very natural reaction, especially if it was, some situation where you felt betrayed, like you're saying, like your trust was broken or not respected. It's very natural that it's going to be painful. We don't have to change that experience. We can feel it. And even like the idea of like, when will this go away, can often then just get us into lots of compulsions because we're like checking and like, oh, I still feel this pain. I shouldn't. Oh, I can't get into a relationship. I can't talk to somebody else until I get rid of it. I need to clean it away. But maybe it can be there. We'll always have memories of, oh, like that, I really like that person and that sucked that they screwed me over and they betrayed my trust. That sucked that I cared for them so much and they just took that and ran. And so what we don't want to do is shut ourselves down and start to say, oh, well, I'm not going to give love. I'm not going to give trust because it might get stolen. We fear getting ripped off. What helped me a lot in relationships is saying, look, like, yeah, absolutely. Like, it'll get ripped off. My trust will be broken. Absolutely. And I want to give more. I want to give the things I want to give, and I'm not expecting them to be reciprocated or to get anything. And I might get hurt, but I'm going to enjoy loving, enjoy celebrating life and being part of that. And isn't it wonderful that we can have the experience of caring about somebody, and we can have the experience of having our hearts broken? It's a great reminder that we still have a heart. Oh, Jillian, thank you so much for joining us. Noor said, whenever I'm talking to my boss about important stuff, my brain throws a repetitive thought about me not being able to concentrate, which really distracts me from understanding and hearing. So one of the things that could be fun to explore is wanting to do things while distracted. Because we get it in our head like, oh, maybe with my boss, and it's important, or I could get fired. There's probably some kind of fear there, right, where the brain says, we've got to have this clean experience, this perfect, focused, controlled experience. But that guarantees the brain is going to throw up thoughts because it's trying to protect you. So it's like going in and saying, I don't want to be distracted. And the brain goes, okay, I will help you. Are you distracted? Or is that distracting? Ooh, that's kind of distracting. Are you distracted? And it's trying to protect you because we said, I don't want to have this. Protect me from this. So we've got to go in saying, hey, I want to be distracted here. I want to learn how to have a conversation with my boss. Well, like a monster is screaming at me. Another monster is chewing on my leg. My brain is trying to do like physics equations. And I want to practice giving my attention. And you know what? I probably will get distracted because that's a lot of distractions. And I'm going to be kind to that, okay with that, because it's fine. I like being distracted. And I'm going to choose what I give my attention to. So it can seem like the opposite of what you want to do, but it's starting to recognize that when we try to chase control and certainty, we create the opposite. So now, by pursuing the opposite, being like, I want to be distracted with my boss, the byproduct of that is that we actually start to enjoy being there, and the brain doesn't have to constantly throw up the distractions because it's trying to protect us from them. Oh no, thank you. H said, I kept ruminating over an intrusive thought for months. At first, it latched onto a situation, but I knew it was intrusive. Then it latched onto something scarier. After these months, I realized all of these are stupid, but when I look back to the initial thought, it feels real, and the whole cycle starts again with new themes. What can I do to fix the confusion? So I wouldn't look at fixing the confusion. Actually, I'd see that as the problem. Like when you mentioned earlier, check the exact way you phrased it. You said, I knew it was intrusive. And so that just ends up being a type of reassurance, which then says to the brain, oh, okay, like you enjoyed figuring out that was intrusive. Okay, here's something more complex. Is it intrusive? Is it real? And it's just going to keep leveling up, right? Because if we just keep chasing certainty and going, oh, that's an intrusive thought, or that's OCD, or that's the mental illness, that's not me, that's actually just a compulsion that's encouraging the brain to keep leveling up the uncertainty. So this is one area where I found I was really helped because I had no insight. So I never researched anything about mental health online. I never considered that I struggled. This is when I was dealing with mental illness. I did not consider that it was mental illness because I saw everything I was doing was totally real. So even then, when starting, I was also lucky though, when I started therapy, there was none of that, like label it as intrusive or label it as OCD or something, label it as irrational. There was none of that. It was just about cutting out the compulsions. And that meant then feeling like I was allowing very real, very terrible things to happen. And that was useful because that's actually where we show the brain we can make changes. Because if the brain says, here's a terrible thing that could happen. Like I used to, like not hold sharp things because I would see myself sticking it in my eyeball. So if though I say to the brain, oh, that is just an intrusive thought, or that is irrational, I am telling the brain that I am still very afraid of that happening. So in this moment, I'm saying, oh, that's it, that's irrational, I don't have to pay attention to that, etc. But that whole engagement is still acknowledging that thing I'm very, very terrified of. So the brain is going to keep worrying about more things related to that. And it's eventually going to latch onto something I can't give myself reassurance about. And then I'll find that very distressing. So instead, I find it much more useful to just focus on giving our time and energy to the things we want to. Yeah, chilling, never. No bad coffee, no bad donuts. Stephen said, there are many external factors that make it difficult for me to focus on what I value. For example, my work has been extremely busy, going from deadline to deadline. Then I often end up back in compulsions. How to navigate through a life where external factors sometimes lead to exhaustion or overwhelm, and to keep the practice on happiness and values instead of fixing. Yeah, so one of the things we can do, because we're often in situations where we don't have control, or for a variety of reasons, we have to set aside a bunch of things and just focus on, something like maybe, for instance, taking care of a loved one or something like that. Or something's happened with our family right now and we're like, I just have to work. I have to make money for the family. I'm gonna be occupied, or it's gonna be really busy. So one of the things I found really helpful to do there is to shift our values. So always saying that values are changeable. Values depend on the environment where we're at. because you could look at it, there's a bunch of mountains around me I can see. And so if I say I value swimming, if I have to cross a mountain right now, it's going to be very, very stressful because I value swimming and I can't swim on this mountain. And I could get very upset about that. Or I could change up my values to fit with the environment in which I find myself, just recognizing, okay, this is where I am right now. And if I can't change that, then it's going to be useful to enjoy doing what I'm doing. At the same, because even if I was going to change that in the future, like say somebody was in a job, and they're like, one, I hate this job, and two, now it's really busy, I got to get out of here. But if they're working super, super hard in that job and they hate it, they're going to be so exhausted. At the end of the day, they're not going to have the time and energy to get out of there. It's going to be useful to figure out, okay, if I'm stuck in this right now, how can I enjoy this? Well, I start to give time and energy to getting out of this situation. We don't have to rely on hating something to change it. We can make it okay to be somewhere, and we can put time and energy into not being there. So in whichever situation you're in right now, yeah, I hope you're still getting some time to care for yourself. Finding ways to set boundaries that really work for you. Rocky said, I have a question about what is meant by recovery is unreasonable, because I found I need any reason to work. Recovery is unreasonable because the brain will always give you reasons, totally rational, totally reasonable reasons to do compulsions. And so, and yeah, if it depends on reasons, if it depends on a feeling, like, oh, I don't feel like doing things that will take me in the direction I want to go, or I don't feel like doing useful things, then yeah, we just don't go there. We don't do them, and it's really helpful it really helped me to make it like just things I do. Like there are just things I do. And so if the brain's like, oh, but here's a reason not to do that, I'm like, yeah, that's a great reason, brain, but this is the thing I do, so I'm gonna do it. So really, really nailing down what are those actions that are useful to us, and then they've got to be unreasonable. Erica said, how do you create healthy routines and structures for yourself as a self-employed person? When I'm not working at a job, my life kind of turns into a blob and I do more unhealthy stuff. Yeah, it's really, really natural. Learning how to work for ourselves and learning how to work in unstructured time, really, challenging skill. Like I 100% credit, taking care of my mental health and exploring all of these skills with now, like I would say one of the most enjoyable parts of it is that I can be at home and do the things I want to do and do the work I want to do. Whereas in the past, that was impossible. Like a lot of you probably familiar, I talked about it in my book, how I'd always wanted to write a book, and then I took time off to write a book, and I just did Compulsions for 6 months. And now it's so enjoyable to be able to, I was really noticing this the other day, just being able to wake up. In the past I would have just woken up and done tons of compulsions or been checking like, are these intrusive thoughts there, etc. But to be able to wake up and say, oh, I really want to go and give this, I really want to go and share this, here's when I'm going to work on this, here's when I'm going to go take a swim later, here's when I'm going to meditate, here's when we're going to do a live session, and just enjoying that. Here's when I'm going to go and get donuts. So there's a couple things I find important for starting to explore this. So one is to explore it like a practice. So actually starting at work starting at home not having a blob of time. So first I suggest to people you're probably going to need actually to really structure things. And then you gradually introduce unstructured time and practicing choosing to do something you value. So at first, for example, I found it really helpful what I would do is I would go and work in a coffee shop, because I noticed if I was working around people, then I would work. Yeah, I would work. I'd be like, and also there weren't as many other things I could go and do. It's like, oh, I'm just there and I have my work, and so I'm going to do it. And so what I would do though, while I was there working, is actually work on things for when I went home. So I would maybe, for instance, write in a notebook or plan something out in a notebook, like maybe do some kind of drawing or diagram or something. And then that's because as soon as I got back home, then I was going to take that and turn that into something on my computer, and to share it, or send whatever email. So even emails, I would write them out by hand at the coffee shop and then practice going home, type them up. So I was, again, giving myself something to do. But even then, as soon as I was done, I would often leave again or go to a different place at home, work there, to just really give my brain a structure. But then over time, starting to increase the amount of free time. And that's how I would start, because I would say now my schedule is much more just values based. Like I'll just look at what's important to me today. And so I'll often take a moment in the morning to identify maybe 3 things that are important to me today. And then that's gonna determine my schedule. And then if something's done and there's free time, I go back to what's important to me today. Oh yeah, that's important. Okay, let's go do that right now. And so right now it's much more open and loose. But starting out, I would start pretty structured, even if it is just going to be, even if somebody's taking a day off at first, because even if we're working super hard and we're like, oh, I need a day off, often what happens then is, because we've been so scheduled, our day has been so packed, we hit that free day and the brain doesn't know what to do with it, so it just falls back on doing old compulsions. It's like, whoa, you don't have anything to do? Go solve this. Go solve existence. And we're like, okay, brain, I'll solve existence, because it gives us something to do. So even right now, for anybody who's super busy and you have free time coming up, I'd actually schedule it in if you find you struggle with doing a lot of compulsions. Ellis Girl said, is it possible that my dreams can affect my OCD? Some mornings I wake up and it's just there. It's heavy, I'm tired, and I can't see the day ahead. My compulsions are mental checking feelings. So actually checking if dreams affect OCD is a really common reassurance compulsion. So it could help to expand that the compulsions aren't just mental checking feelings, that there's probably a lot of types of checking going on. If you struggle with mornings, then it's really useful to have, like I used to put a note on my phone. This is my phone. I used to put a note on my phone that would tell me what to do in the morning. Because I'd wake up and it's either like checking something or there's a feeling. Like I used to have like dreams that felt so real. I'd be like, oh no, did I do that when I woke up? And then that could just easily derail the morning and then the whole day. And so actually putting an action on a note on my phone. And all I had to commit to was, I'm going to follow whatever that note says. I had a horrible dream. I had no dream. I had no sleep. I feel super anxious. Something feels wrong. I'm tired, whatever. That's great. I'm going to do the action that's on the note. And I'm going to practice bringing those experiences with me. So often it's a super simple action. It'd be like, go to the kitchen and get a glass of water. And it's just to help practice bringing those uncomfortable experiences along with us. No worry, enjoy being distracted at work. Bogdanov, you said, I am selected for a job for the first time. Congratulations. And for that, I left my town and relocated to the city. Woo, city life. But I'm currently feeling anxious about what if I don't get a joining email. Oh, congratulations on feeling anxious too. You can have that uncertainty. What would you like to do while being uncertain about that? Maya, hello. Welcome. FRD Games said, I'm very confused as when I tell myself that it's okay to feel fear, anxiety. The anxiety is not as bad and does not come up often. Could this be seen as a compulsion as it reduces anxiety? So I would actually put the compulsion is like checking on it, right? We get really afraid, like, oh, I can't do compulsions, they're bad. And then we end up though checking. Like there's actually I have a video here on YouTube called Checking into Relapse, and it's just about this. Like we start checking to make sure we're not doing bad things that will make us relapse or make us not recover, but it just becomes like any health anxiety. Like, oh, I've gotta not have these bad things. These bad compulsions will contaminate me, and horrible things will happen. So it really helped to make compulsions okay. Uh, having you know that it's okay to feel fear and anxiety is just a fact. So yeah, if you want to spend less time on that because it's a fact, so you're like, oh, I don't have to keep telling myself that because it's just true. Yeah, that can be something to explore, but also not getting caught up in that fear of like, ooh, I shouldn't do compulsions, because it becomes a very easy way for the brain to trick us back in to struggling. Stephen, yeah, yeah. So there, I guess I always had this idea that I should like any situation no matter what, but I guess it's okay to work on changing my situation. But in the meantime, not hating it. Yeah, it's really useful to look at how we want to be spending our time and energy in life, and that includes with things like jobs and stuff like that. Yeah, because it doesn't. There's always options sometimes to explore setting boundaries. What do we want to push back on? Because sometimes we get afraid, like, oh, what are people going to think about me? And we'll happily, like, happily just exhaust ourselves to make people think a particular thing about us, or not, uh, have some kind of error or mistake in our work. Like, not, we gotta have that be perfect. But it can also be useful to look at, yeah, what am I chasing there and what's actually useful to me? So one of the things, an exercise I often suggest to people, is to draw what I call an ideal day. And you pick a year from now and you draw out how you want to be spending your time and energy. And you look at like what you're doing at home and what you're doing at work and who do you interact with and how much money you're making and how much time you're spending on things. And then you see, like, okay, if that's what I want to be doing, and here's what I'm doing right now, what is the path to getting there? Because yeah, sometimes it's changing where we're at. Like actually saying, okay, I am going to stay here, but I'm going to change the environment. I'm going to articulate for how things can work better. But then other times it might actually being like going to something better. And so an ideal day exercise is a way to see that. Chris, good morning. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Jillian, yeah, you can have thoughts. Oh, Marlos, what is my definition of intuition? I don't have one. It's not something I would ever think about. I mean, tuition is the money we pay for school, and in is like being in something. And so intuition, I mean, if English is logical, then intuition must be something inside the money we pay for school. I'm telling you, English would be so much more convenient if it used like characters, like Japanese or Chinese, because then we could say that makes sense and that word makes sense. But like intuition makes no sense. Also, it's a weird sounding word. I mean, if it was more phonetic, we'd say intuition. So maybe I'll start referring to it that way when people ask, because people do ask a lot about intuition. I'm going to start calling it intuition. Oh, Jillian, but you said, how do I overcome this silly thought? But that's it. I need to overcome this silly thought, this horrible thought, this violent thought. That is the compulsion. Because the brain, it's like the brain is just a random guy on the street shouting stuff. And then if we go, oh, that guy said I'm an alligator. How do I overcome this? Mm-hmm. We often set goals like that, but the goal is the compulsion. The goal is the thing that gets us trapped. We don't have to spend any time on it. The guy on the side of the street can say I'm an alligator. There's only a problem if I start trying to fix it. Sashin, you said how to get rid of mental compulsions. These are affecting my health very badly. A huge help for me with mental compulsions was cutting out the normal mental compulsions that I liked. So starting to see that there's not like good ways and bad ways of doing things in our brains, but we often categorize them that way, right? We'll think, oh, like thinking about getting my grocery list right, that's useful, like that's good. But then me thinking about, you know, feeling morally right and like I won't go to hell, oh, that's a compulsion I struggle with and I need to fix that. They're the same. They're me spending time and energy in my head trying to feel right about something. And so it can really help to, no, actually, I won't even just say it can really help. I would say it's actually really necessary because the brain's logical. The brain goes, wait a second, you just spent 2 hours, maybe longer. You spent your entire morning at work in meetings thinking about what you were going to have for lunch so that you can feel right about what you're eating and that it's good for your body. But then when the brain's like, I want to spend all night thinking about not going to hell, you don't want to do it. Which one's more dangerous? And so the brain sees, oh no, we're going to spend eternity in hell or whatever it is as threatening. And so it just logically says, if you spend 5 hours of the day thinking about your lunch, you've got to spend, all night thinking about how are we going to avoid going to hell. So we've got to start to change that logic, and that's going to mean changing how we do everything in our heads. Dean, thank you so much for the donation, man. And I don't know what the encouragement to enjoy the wonderful views. I hope you are enjoying some wonderful views today. Thank you. Bob, he said, I've always been single and I'm now 43 years old. How to handle anxiety of being lonely forever, being judged by others for living that way, and going crazy because of loneliness. So of course I'm single. How old am I now? I forgot that. I'm 42. So my perspective of this is of course going to be shaped by the fact that I'm single and 42 and don't see that as an issue at all. So part of this will be looking at the kind of judgments and beliefs you're holding around stuff like that. So that's part of it. There is going to be a set of looking at judgments and beliefs and just considering like what's actually useful to you. Then something I always suggest people explore with this is to look at how you are with yourself. So we spend a lot of time with ourselves, and if we're not a good person to hang out with, like we're constantly criticizing ourselves, we're just constantly talking about things in our heads that we don't find interesting, we hate, etc. If we're not caring for ourselves, if we're not celebrating ourselves, right? If we're constantly looking at ourselves and being like, oh, you shouldn't be this way, or you shouldn't do that, or people are going to judge you for that, then of course we don't like being alone. So yeah, first I'd start there. So one, recognizing you're never alone because you're always with your brain, and or you could say you're always with yourself. Are you being a good friend to yourself? And I used to be really afraid of I used to do all sorts of things because I was like scared of being alone. And it really helped to explore enjoying how to be alone. And the benefit of that is now that I could be in a relationship. And I've had longer relationships, like actually learning how to be alone and learning how to be kind to myself actually is what helped me have longer relationships. at the same time, yeah, it's also totally fine with being alone and building community. We are, yeah, absolutely social beings, and but there's no barrier to that in being alone. If anything, I get to spend more time with people and more time building connections and relationships with many people. So yeah, also looking at the fact that yeah, if you're going to be, whether you're alone or not, it's really useful to build connection and relationships and community with people. And that's not like getting in a relationship is not a guaranteed path to that. Even if you did get into a relationship, you'd still need to build connection and community and relationships with others, and building that social support around you. So that's something you can do now. And if you were in a relationship later, you could keep doing that. Pluto, Pluto Duke, what's up? It is a long time. I hope you're doing well. Kevin said, I've never had a panic attack per se. I find myself constantly worrying about the potential and constantly monitor my body, which then makes me feel nervous, lightheaded. How do I go about it? Yeah, so one, actually, what you're doing there is what creates panic attacks. And as you're seeing, it makes you anxious, makes you feel lightheaded. Panic attacks are just a set of checking and controlling compulsions to avoid a bad thing, which then makes us feel things that are bad, which then makes us worry we are losing control, which makes us more anxious, and boom, we have a bad experience, whatever you want to call it. I've also learned over the years that many people have many different descriptions for panic attacks. Uh, Something that'll be really useful is cutting out checking around physical experiences. And we don't have it anymore, but I don't know, you may remember there used to be a note up on my wall behind me when I had a wall, which said have panic attacks. And so if we want to have them, then we don't have to check on them. Right? So they're great. That would be amazing to have. Of course, I'm not going to check because it would be awesome to go into this experience and just lose my shit completely. Let's go to it. Wanting that helps the brain not have to keep checking for it. Stephen, yeah, I said, so when do we decide to change a situation? It seems like there's a fine line between needing to change something versus needing to learn to not let it get in the way of life. Exactly. And so that's where I find values are really useful, like having really concrete, specific values and doing something like an ideal day to actually map out, like, here are the things that are going to help me thrive. And then we also see the things, it's an opportunity to rank and really see what's most important, so that then we can say, okay, here are the things I'm willing to like build skills around or learn how to handle, but here are the things that are non-negotiable. These are things I really want in my life. And then we look and say, okay, are those things here? They're not. Or some of these are and some aren't. And then we take steps to bring them in. And so, yeah, it's totally, in many ways, values are about that. Value. One way I often describe values is that values are like how to make cookies well. We absolutely can endure bad cookies. Excuse me. See, my body was so upset at the idea of bad cookies. We can endure it, but, and sometimes, yeah, maybe it's the thought that counts. We're like, thank you for this cookie, and we appreciate they gave us cookies, even if the cookies aren't good. However, we do know how to make good cookies. And taking care of our mental health is not about like just it's not about enduring suffering for the sake of it. There are absolutely times where in the pursuit of doing things that we value, so doing things well, there are going to be uncomfortable feelings. But we say, look, this is moving in that direction of making good cookies, so I'm going to take this on. I'm going to handle this. But there are other situations where we're like we're somebody's throwing bricks at us. We don't have to go, well, this is really painful, and I am going to accept the uncertainty of whether it will continue and embrace pain, because you're not going to get any cookies from that. It's just going to be struggle and suffering and pain. So yeah, always start with the cookies. Start with the values. What are the things I want to do well? What's going to lead to that? Because yeah, something that really helped me was seeing that mental illness, struggling with mental illness, is a lot of work. But we often like take on that work, right? Like the brain throws up an uncertainty, and we're like, I'm going to spend hours researching this, or I'm going to spend days and weeks thinking about this. We'll do a lot of work. And too often, the great metaphor, I didn't come up with this metaphor. I don't know where it came from, but it was the saying is like, don't light yourself on fire to keep somebody else warm, something to that effect. And it relates to codependent relationships, but it's something we do a lot, where we'll go, oh, this is somebody is asking me to offer up my life, because if I don't, they'll be angry at me. And so often we're like, oh yeah, I don't want people to be angry at me. Okay, I'll light myself on fire. And like, I'll endure it because I value helping people. And it's so useful to see it's not about that at all. So values, think more of cookies. How do we make cookies well? Jan 970 said, what is your opinion on setting aside time to do exposures? I've been in therapy on and off for OCD for a really long time, and didn't find as much help as I did when you read your book. Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for reading my book. Yeah, one of the reasons for doing that, and you'll see in the exercises in the book, right? There's not a lot of that idea of like, you're just gonna go and do exposures. The reason for that too is exposure therapy is not exposure and response prevention therapy. And there's been this fascinating, and this happens all the time in the mental health field, where words get attached to things that they are not. And I don't know how exactly it happened, but exposure therapy was a older, but at the time very popular therapy, but we're going back to like the 70s here. 70s and 80s, like we're gonna, expose you to this fearful thing, and then you will habituate and you will no longer be afraid of it. And that's really appealing, because that's in many ways what we try to do with mental illness compulsions, right? Oh, I'm gonna do this thing and I'm gonna get rid of this fear. So very, very, very appealing. Also for professionals, it gives them an exercise that feels safe too, right? Well, we're not gonna go challenge the real thing. I'm gonna go have you do this like written, repetitive exercise in safety, and it's gonna make you feel better. And then when you feel better, we're gonna take it into the real world. I found it more helpful to make changes in the real world. There are situations where, so you do set aside time for doing exercises, but I would still say they're a practice that's very real world based. So for example, I had lots of food compulsions and around the fear of vomit. So yeah, I don't know, maybe somebody might say like, go and do, I don't know, write scripts or watch videos of people vomiting, or write scripts about like, I will vomit on everybody on the bus, so I will eat a big breakfast of eggs and oatmeal. And I mean, I suppose I could have done that. That would have felt uncomfortable, absolutely. But the point is not to get rid of a feeling. The point is to live our lives. At the same time, what I did was set aside a month to make eggs every single day. So I used to not eat eggs because just the smell would make me want to vomit. And I was afraid, oh no, if I eat eggs or am around eggs, I'll vomit. So I avoided them. And then I saw that was unhelpful and just more of the compulsions. So yeah, I in a sense, I set aside 30 days of breakfast to practice exercises. But I was going to eat breakfast anyway. So I'm into exercises like that. Or I had a really a physical fascinating compulsion around the stove. So not only did I have lots of checking on the stove, but when my mental health struggles were at their worst, I couldn't move away from the stove if it was on. It so if there was a pot on the stove, I just had to stand there with it. And it felt physically excruciating to step even one step to the side. Like the exercise that I did at first was just boiling water and stepping one step to the side. And it seemed like now I would have no problem putting something on the stove and walking away, but that felt like physically painful to have the pot on the stove be like just right over there. Like totally, we're talking like well within arm's reach, one step to the side. And so there were exercises like that, which were very purposeful. But again, in tied to things that were useful. Like it's useful for me to be able to use the stove. Jan, I see you're explaining down below. You said, I personally didn't find as much help doing exposures because my life became revolved around exposures and doing them right. Yeah, it was more useful to focus on what I value in life, 100%. Because I find it weird that they're so popular because my immediate reaction on hearing that is, how is that not a compulsion? You want people to repeat something that's not just living their lives, and you often want them to like measure how they feel. I mean that I would see that as just totally a compulsion. Extermination, hello, welcome. Lisa, you said, how can I stop being so hard on myself when I don't achieve what I set out on? Well, one is, yeah, not doing that. So part of it will be like seeing it as an action and saying, oh, like this is an action I'm not going to do, and exploring how to do that. But also often then about changing goals. So it really helped me to keep success close. And because we'll often, it seems the brain has an amazing capacity for self-sabotage. We'll often set goals that actually, even though we tell ourselves we'll do them, there's no way we're gonna be able to do them. And then, because yeah, then we'll feel bad, and then we'll do compulsions to hate on ourselves, and the cycle repeats. So yeah, really useful to start exploring like simple, super simple goals. Like I would say my success each day is eating breakfast. Anything I do after breakfast is just extra. Georgia, yeah, I said, how did you get into mental health coaching? I'm thinking of leaving my counseling course and becoming an ACT therapist, but it would mean losing the master's certificate. Unsure if it matters. Yeah, so I never planned to get in to doing what I do now. It came about, yeah, just by starting to share content and skills. It was, I did therapy, and then I was amazed at how few supports there were for people to navigate change. And by that I mean, so I was working in change management and innovation. So I was basically helping organizations innovate. And one of the first things I learned there was that anytime a group of people change, uncertainty increases, and they're going to feel the urge to drop back on what they've done before. So I learned that before I started doing therapy, before I even noticed, or I noticed there were problems, but I did not recognize that I was struggling with a mental illness. But I knew that if you change, uncertainty and uncomfortable feelings increase. Everybody wants to go back to what they've done before, across the board for all humans. And so I was so shocked when I started doing therapy, and I was at the worst point in my life. I couldn't take one step away from a pot of boiling water. I was so amazed that in therapy, so often it's just you just talk to people, and then with no plan, no visual map, you're expected to just go and make the biggest change and biggest innovation in your life. And there's tons of research on how humans change, and that is not an effective way for humans to make and sustain changes. We're not skilled at that. It helps. And so I started just sharing these kinds of supports that were really useful for change, that we know are really useful for human change, and then just repurposing them for mental health. And then that just grew from there. And then after a couple of years, some people had reached out and they asked about, like, oh, can you just work with me on this? And it wasn't something I was pursuing or looking for, but I was like, sure, like we can explore that. And then yeah, it just grew from there. So yeah, when people are wanting to explore something like that, I always suggest that, very similar to cooking, you just start sharing your food. If you want to open a restaurant, start making food for people. And so yeah, if you're exploring, you know, whether to change the counseling or do ACT or something like that, I would look at, like, trying those things out, by sharing them with other people, like sharing them within a mental health community, or on social media, etc., to see if you like that, to see if people like that food. So really thinking about it like a restaurant. Yeah, you don't have to jump right into opening a restaurant and be like, I am going to leave. If you're doing one cooking course and you're like, I am leaving this cooking course, screw French food, I'm opening a Japanese restaurant. Yeah, you can start making Japanese food for people first, and just exploring that, before making the leap. So too, yeah, I was still working as a management consultant, and then I was the executive director of a charity, doing very full-time jobs, like 12-hour day jobs, while creating mental health content online, and starting to work with people, before I said, oh, this is a thing I want to pursue full time. Elsa, Elsa, I see your comments, but I don't see what your question is. Could you share it as a question? Yeah, extermination. This is a really key point. He said, I'm starting to realize it's easier to build mental fitness skills when I'm building the skills in areas of my life that I value, like building them in a relationship rather than just an open field. Yeah. And that's a huge. It's great you brought up relationship too, because I said that one comes up all the time. I did this in the past. This idea of, like, I have to get better before I can be in a relationship, or I've got to get ready. I've got to feel grounded. I've got to feel more balanced. I've got to find closure, etc. All of these things we do, but the only way to work on that stuff is in relationships and practicing, being in those experiences and giving the things we want to give and trying things. And so making that okay. Yeah, we may not get it right. It may feel uncomfortable, and we can have those experiences and learn. Dean, he said, I can fake wanting anxiety or fake accepting bad thoughts, but I don't really believe I want to have those bad experiences. I could really want to feel bad, or how could one really want to feel bad and have bad thoughts? Yeah, so part of it, so there is a bit of a change around the idea of them being bad. It helped me to see that people who like roller coasters and people who hate roller coasters have the same experience. But one person is going, the person who hates roller coasters is like, whoa, this feels out of control. We're going to fall out. We're going to vomit. Stop everything. I don't like this. And then the person who likes them is like, whoa, this feels so out of control. I'm probably going to vomit. This is amazing. We're all going to die. Let's go. And they like them. And the rush, the interpretation of the rush is different, but the actual experience is the same. Same with physical fitness. People who like weightlifting are gonna like feel super sore, really drop the weights, like really struggle, push to their limits, and call that a good workout. Somebody who doesn't like working out is gonna have the exact same experience and be like, "Oh, I shouldn't do that. I'll get injured. This is the end of it. It's terrible. It wrecks me for days, etc. I don't want to do it anymore." But they're the same experience. One help I find with this is having that focus on the things I want to do in life. So again, it's the thing with good cookies. So I say, look, if the path to going where I want to go involves riding roller coasters, then it's going to be useful to me to ride those roller coasters because I want to go there. If I want to go there, I want to have any experience on the way there. Where do you want to go? And maybe start there. Setting, because we don't have to, like, just for the sake of it, go after like bad feelings or any feelings. But where is that place you want to go? Then looking at the things that are challenging on the way there, saying, look, this doesn't feel comfortable right now. I don't like this. This doesn't feel like a good idea, but it's going to be really useful if I start to ride roller coasters a lot. Oh, thanks people for sharing my book with your therapist. Yeah, Stephen, enjoy those good cookies. Anthony, so I have an obsessive fear of not getting or staying aroused in sexual situations or even on my own. I worry that because arousal and anxiety don't exist, that I'll never be able to again. Oh no, it got cut off. Well, Anthony, but anyway, it's really common. So, really common fear because, of course, there's uncertainty with it, and then we attach all sorts of meanings to it, and so on. One of the things to look at there could be the goals that you're pursuing. Because if you're like, I need to have certainty about this, I need to make sure, it's going to control a bunch of things and stuff like that, then it's really natural. Then of course the brain is going to obsess about it, and then of course it's naturally going to be checking, and then because it's checking, you're going to find things that make you, oh no, it's not, like things aren't working right, etc. It's going to make you more panicked and so on. It's just like panic attacks. If our goal is to have control, then the brain has to check. If it checks, it's going to find we don't control, and then it's just going to get worse. And so really cutting out that kind of checking, but also looking at the goal. So there's a video I have on YouTube called Anatomy of a Compulsion. Could really help to look at that, because you'll see there's beliefs, there's judgments, and there's desires. And desires are those goals that we're pursuing, but then they interact with beliefs. If we believe I must, if you're like, I must never have any problems in bed sexually, then the brain's like, oh, okay, like we need to make sure that we're never going to have any problems. And then of course it's going to end up doing lots of compulsions, and then the judgments come in because that's not something you control, and so on. So breaking that cycle, so really breaking the unhelpful beliefs and the desires and the judgments. Oh, Narina, no, this is an important thing you share here. You said in the last live stream, you mixed a hot chocolate and a coffee. This is something that happened, yes. I was in Mexico City. I mixed a hot chocolate, a delicious, freshly made cocoa with a coffee. You say here you bought a mocha instead. That's acceptable too. Nicole, you said therapist over here who questions the field all the time. It's so run by insurance. Yeah, I see there's a conversation happening. But also, see, I think some questions are getting removed before I get to them, because I can see the responses to the question in the chat, but then the question itself seems to be removed. And I only bring that up because that could really help not to do that for you. That, whatever the thing is you're trying to control there, totally not necessary. Yeah, Jan, you said here, my therapist used to get me doing exposures, in quotation marks, that had nothing to do with what I wanted to keep in life. I just wanted to learn how to live. Yeah, and that's the thing I find the problem with it is so much of our fears are about not living our lives. And then when we do compulsions, we fuel that fear because the brain's going, we want to live our life. And then look, you're spending hours not living your life, so it then worries even more. And that's one of the issues with taking time away from life to go and fix feelings and thoughts. It'll, in many ways, can just fuel more anxiety. Alize, you said, others' questions sometimes become our obsessions. Why? Is our brain so vulnerable in the midst of OCD? No, it's totally the compulsions. You know, just look at all of the uncertainties that come up that are not necessary that you check on. And so if you teach the brain that, like a great example, like multiple streams and multiple times today, you've asked where I am. Totally irrelevant, just a random uncertainty. If I wanted to share where I was, I would. But you can see how you spend time on that, and then that just teaches the brain, hey, any random uncertainty, let's spend time on it. And so then another uncertainty comes up, the brain's like, we should spend time on this because this is an uncertainty. And so just starting to show the brain that you can spend time and energy on things that are useful is really helpful. It's a really helpful lesson for it. Because otherwise, if it's like, whoa, any uncertainty we should spend time and energy on, it'll often do that. Rocky, you said, is OCD people successful in their field? I don't know. What do you mean there? Shane said, when doing ERP and having a feeling of anxiety, is it better to sit in and be comfortable? Or should I explore the physical feelings like in the meditation practice where you focus on it? So basically, should I learn to be comfortable in it by just sitting and acknowledging the anxiety, or work on exploring the feeling, such as why and how the anxiety makes me feel and what it's doing? So I would look instead at like, what do you want to be spending your time and energy on in life? Because that sounds very much like trying to get a feeling right, and even like trying to get comfortable. Do you have to get comfortable with it? Like, what's the purpose behind doing what you described there? And so I would look at, like we were talking about earlier, about identifying where we want to go, like with the bad feelings, and then what's going to be useful to go where we want to go. So if I want to make good cookies, what's useful to making good cookies? Then that shows me what I want to work on. So yeah, if I have to ride a bunch of roller coasters to get to the place where we make the good cookies, and I'm like, okay, what happens when I'm on a roller coaster? I feel like I'm gonna vomit. Okay, the thing I want to get good at is feeling like I'm gonna vomit. And I don't have to get rid of that. Maybe that's just part of going where I want to go. On the way to where I want to go, I'll feel like I vomit. Maybe sometimes I do vomit. Oh, and Erica mentioned here, yeah, I like to allow any feeling, including anxiety, to be there while I do the stuff I care about. I don't need to sit with it or figure out why it's here. It can just be there while I do stuff. Exactly. It's that. Like, yeah, they're gonna be feelings. And like the feelings, they're not a problem. So they can, yeah, they can be there. And we can have them completely. I think of note with this, sometimes I think people have an idea that like accepting a feeling means like kind of like not having it. Still, it's like, oh, I accept it, so like I'm not going to feel it. But it's actually like I was describing there with the roller coaster. No, like maybe I'll be nauseous. I can feel nauseous. That's a human experience I can have. Because I found I was so afraid of pain, so afraid of loss and sadness, that I would then also avoid having good feelings. Because it's like, oh, if I feel too good about it, I'm gonna feel so sad when I lose it. Or if it feels so good, it'll get wrecked. And then it'll feel terrible. And I'll lose myself, I'll be so anxious, etc. So I had like such a narrow range of emotions that I would allow. So one huge benefit of making it okay to feel like pain and anxiety and depression and any kind of like really terrible feeling and feel loss is that I can also feel much happier. Because yeah, maybe I will really love something, or I will be really excited by something, and it'll be incredible, and I'll lose it. and that'll be terrible, and I'll really feel bad about that, and that's okay too. Oh, also, if you put your question in 3 parts, I cannot see it. I have a very, very, very tiny, tiny question window. Um, and I see you just kind of asking, like, "Is this bad?" And so I won't, um, yeah, I won't have an answer about, like, if something's good or bad. I would ask instead, like, what do you if it's about music, like, what do you wanna do with music? How do you want to enjoy music? Kishav, you said, "Is it better to have a journal during OCD, or is it better to just cut out compulsions without having a journal?" Yeah, what would you enjoy? Yeah, I would approach it from that. The like, what's going to be useful to you and where you want to go. What will you enjoy? Yeah, how do you want to spend your time? Caden, you said, "Do you need to do ERP to recover from OCD?" The thing is, ERP is just cutting out compulsions. So you so you could set it aside, say, "Okay, I'm not going to do ERP." But like, will you cut out compulsions? Because there actually are many forms of therapy that are going to involve cutting out compulsions. Um, what like it's not just about ERP, but like you will have to cut them out because like OCD is just doing them. But I would approach it that way. Like what do you want to give your time and energy to in life? And then whatever approach is going to help you do that is going to be useful. It will involve cutting out compulsions, which is what ERP is about. Kaden, I see you explaining below. You said, "I feel I'm always exposed to triggers anyway. So does it need to be an intentional thing?" So it's 100% normal that we're always exposed to triggers. I said that's great. I The intentional piece again, I would bring it back to the like living intentionally, uh, intentionally noticing stuff the brain throws up and choosing to give your time and energy to things you actually care about. It's not going to happen randomly because it is kind of like saying like get mental health very much like physical fitness. So we said like, hey, can I get into shape if I don't do an exercise program? Yeah, but like you still have to intentionally go and do like if you want to like build strength, you're still gonna have to intentionally go and lift weights. Following a program is gonna make it easier, but I don't know if you caught earlier because from your question there or statement, it sounds like you might be thinking of this. ERP doesn't have to be separate from life. It's ERP. Like a lot of what's described as ERP online is exposure therapy. ERP is going to involve experiencing a trigger and choosing to give your time and energy to something else, the response prevention piece. So you can 100% do that in your life. Like that's still going to be about doing it intentionally. That's still going to be about saying, look, every time this week, when I get this trigger popping up, it's going to happen all over the place. I don't know when, but I am going to choose to not do the compulsion. That's the response prevention piece. I'm going to choose to do this other activity that I actually want to spend time and energy on in life. I mean, it'd be really tough to do that without some intention to it. Dory said, "What to expect from a therapy session? They can really vary." Uh, yeah, like they're really like I before I found a therapist who was skilled, I had gone to a couple different therapists, and I didn't know they were not good. Um, so it can really vary. So yeah, so there's also that, right? Like you don't. I mean, the things you experience in a therapy session will vary depending on where you're located, and the theoretical practice the therapist engages with, and their personal skill and how they take care of their mental health, and all sorts of different things like that. So part of it will just be being open. Like it's really gonna vary widely, but I always encourage people to start from like, what do you want from therapy? Like therapy should be helping you do things you want to do in life. And so, yeah, what would you find most useful from therapy? Because then you can gauge whether or not that therapy experience is helping you go where you want to go. And it's totally possible and totally okay to say, oh, actually, this was not what I'm looking for. Here's something else I'm looking for. Just like, yeah, like working with a personal trainer or something, all sorts of different types of exercises, personal skill, gyms, etc. Narina said AI chatbots are becoming more advanced and more popular now. Do you think constantly talking to AI chatbots can be considered a type of compulsion, or is it just curiosity? It sounds like there's more to the story there, but I mean, it's like anything online, right? Like you could say, if you don't want to be spending all of your time going on some like online forum, spending time there, yeah, you can spend your time and energy on other things. Again, always look at like where you want to go. And so if making the cookies you want to make in life requires you to talk to lots of chatbots, then you're probably going to talk to lots of chatbots. But if you want to be making cookies in life that involve like say like making art, for instance, but you're spending all your free time talking to chatbots, you're not going to be happy when you get to a point later and you're like, "Oh, I really want to make art, but I'm not making any art." And then you look at how you're spending your time and energy, and it's just been going to chatbots, like really helping them get better at chatting. So yeah, really just balancing what you want to build and grow. Bagel, bagel, bagel. Welcome back from a hike. What did you see on the hike? Whoa. Make the world a better place. You were reading Dostoevsky this morning. I said, I was reading Dostoevsky's work this morning, and he was talking about repentance. What are your thoughts on repentance in regard to mental health or negative behaviors? It's been a long time since I read Dostoevsky, but I have, and I would like on repentance, I would look at contamination fears, and but also the idea that you cannot clean the past. We like to try, and yeah, you could look at some narratives in Dostoevsky as how a desire to clean the past, um, or contamination from the past, affects characters' actions in the present. But I would question whether that's possible without being, or I would question whether repentance uh, is, and thinking of repentance as a thing that adjusts some kind of debt or balance with the past, as possible. Instead, I would look at like if somebody wants to give the things they want to give in the present, absolutely, that might be informed by experiences they had in the past, but they are not a time traveler. That is happening in the present, and it does not balance some magical ledger that the bad accountant is holding on to. Isabel, you can't find lychees. I apologize. Lychees are a wonderful fruit. Bagel, bagel, bagel. On your hike, you saw many a marsh creature, herons and songbirds and raptors galore. It is there's a beautiful bird I saw yesterday. It landed right in front of me while I was talking on during a session. It was really beautiful. It was like it had like kind of like a lime green like feathering. I felt like it just hopped down right there just to show off its feathers, and then it took off again. but it's wonderful to think it used to be a dinosaur. Oh, you said Tesco's might have tater tots now, which they do. We saw proof of that, right? But they don't have lychees. I mean, tater tots are really the lychee of the potato world. Elsa, so why do we keep thinking a lot on our decisions? How to stop it? Well, it's about recognizing, right, that like thinking is a thing we do. We can make a decision, accept uncertainty, and not like keep chasing that certainty and control and perfection around it. And so yeah, it'll be about practicing showing the brain enough. So a concept that really helped me was just starting to teach my brain, hey, we've done enough. And so just practicing that because it'll feel like it's not enough. It'll always feel, oh, I've got to do something more. I've got to share more. I've got to explain more. I've got to like write out all of these details perfectly. But just starting to let the brain know, hey, no, like we've done enough, because otherwise it'll always keep pushing us. So yeah, really looking at where we want to go, and then what are the actions that are going to take us there. Like again, if we're making cookies, and they're chocolate chip cookies, obviously, but we're like, oh, I've got to make sure every chocolate chip is perfect. And then we've got to like pick up each one and make sure it's not contaminated. But then because we're picking it up, we're going to worry, oh no, because I touched it. What if I touched something earlier today that was contaminated? Now I've touched the chocolate chips. Oh, I better pick them up again and just make sure that I didn't contaminate them when I was picking them up just now to make sure I didn't contaminate them. So often patterns like that are exactly what we're doing. So I've got to be certain about this. I've got to express this. I've got to figure this out perfectly. But then in the process of trying to get it right, we actually get it more wrong, which makes us try to get it more right, which creates more wrong, and so on. So it helps to let our brains know, hey, we've done enough. And so let's practice that right now. Letting the brain know for today, this was enough conversation about brains. Now we can go and do some other things, and we'll take our brains with us. We'll go make some cookies, and whatever feelings come up, maybe they'll be really good feelings, maybe they'll be really bad feelings, maybe there'll be weird physical sensations or no physical sensations, violent thoughts or weird thoughts or no thoughts, or thoughts about llamas, and we can just have those. And we've done enough. We don't have to fix them and control them. Oh, make the world a better place. Thank you so much for the donation. I appreciate it. I appreciate the support. Thank you, everybody, for coming by today. It's so great that we can come together as a community, as people working on these practices and these skills, right? All over the world. We all have brains, and we all want to do things we want to do in life, like make cookies. So I really appreciate that we can come together and talk about how to handle experiences as we make good cookies. Yeah. So yeah, I will see you on the Discord. If you're not part of the Discord and you'd like to join, just send me a message on Instagram or through my website, and I'll hook you up with an invite link, because we have a great community of people there sharing about tater tots and cookie recipes as we have any kinds of things happening in our heads. Dory, question on therapy there. We'll tackle this before we go. Yeah, you said how do you know whether the current therapist you're working with is right for you? So actually step away from the idea of like right, like even that idea, like finding the right thing, but instead look at that, is it helping me go where I want to go? So having a very clear idea of what it is we want to do, and then having a way to measure that. Is that taking me in that direction? Because sometimes actually it's very common that people will actually be with a therapist they really like, and however, it's not actually moving things in any direction, or like they're not doing more of what they want to be doing. And so yeah, they might really enjoy talking to that person. And maybe want to keep that in their lives. But then if there are things you want to be doing in life, it'll be useful to work on skills to take you there, and that might be with somebody else. Also, yes, how do you not get impatient? But yeah, we can be impatient. Doesn't mean we have to like do things about that and try to fix and control the stuff the brain throws up. Pacific Ocean. Oh, thank you. Oh, I appreciate you stopping by and the kind words. Thank you. All right, everybody. I will go enjoy some coffee and some sundae. Yeah, have a great day wherever you are in the world with whatever that organ's doing up there. All right. Thanks, everybody.